Greetings, my fellow freedom-loving sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to LL3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Swamp Mango, South Florida, and today's date is Friday, March 5th, 2021. Yes, I wish some folks on Facebook happy birthday. They know who they are. And Eddie Grant's birthday is today. Yeah. Musician, turned 73 years old. Of course, Electric Avenue, Romancing the Stone. And Go Home Joanna, which is about fighting apartheid. It's pretty cool because I'm always have a total appreciation with his work. Even some of the radio stuff, but when you see what he did, other things he did, it was very cool. So, always admired him. And he was broke racial barriers as well in England and other parts of the world. So, you always got to give props to these beautiful individuals. So, just witnessing his usual Twilight Zone, geopolitically speaking. I can go on and on and on, but it's not even worth the headaches. Do a couple, I know still hell's breaking loose still in Myanmar, hurting unarmed protesters, medical apartheid in Israel. Yep, so they're going to do forced inoculations in Israel, which you treat them the same way as communist China. I say yes. It's not being anti-Semitic either. Hey, it's called principles, folks. There's no such thing as exceptionalism or being choosy. Happens a lot, in the political world we live in. But a lot of us can still defy it. It's called free speech. So, if I see people protesting about Israel on the medical apartheid, and they're going to say you can't do that, it's anti-Semitic, I'll give them a big penile microphone. Talk on this. It doesn't matter who's in there, who's in office. Local, state, or federal, I don't care. So, the road to technocracy. Always got to remain vigilant, folks. But it is an exciting time to be alive. And, of course, more states' rights here in the U.S. 10th Amendment style, and I love it. And I tell it to people, it doesn't matter who's in there, regardless of faction. Always exercise your state's rights. They want to say it's dead. It never did. Just evolved, but the principles are still there. We all have obligations? Absolutely. And I know I'm just, how to get that off my chest a little bit. It's all well and good. Speaking of tyranny and factions, this one here came out consortiumnews.com. Consortium. And folks, when I do these narrations on these certain articles from these websites, if they have if they have a donation link, please do it. Support all these beautiful folks. And doesn't mean you have to agree with them and everything, but they have the right to their own views. Hey, in Consortium News, some of the people they got in there, I'm not gonna agree with them and everything either. Okay, but I'm always looking at the pros and cons, common interest. So, and they don't want that. The factioneers don't want that. The technocrats despise that with a passion. So, this one here is very cool. And, this one's entitled MLK and Fred Hampton versus J. Edgar Hoover. And this was written by James D. Eugenio, yeah. James D. Eugenio. And it says, tracks the FBI boss and his renegade violence against any sign of a black messiah through two current films. So it's mainly about the films, and I'm going to have to check out these films myself. This is what he has to say. In the late afternoon of April 4th, 1968, in Memphis, Martin Luther King Jr. was preparing to go to dinner with some friends as he stepped out onto the balcony of his room at the Lorraine Motel. He was killed by an assassin bullet that struck him in the cheek. In the pre-dawn hours of December 4th, 1969, in Chicago, a drug Fred Hampton was wounded in his sleep during a police raid on his rented apartment. He was then killed by 2 more bullets, after which, according to Hampton's fiancée, Deborah Johnson, who was on the scene, the officer said, "He's good and dead now." The arc drawn between those 2 murders outlines more than the death of those 2 men. In effect, it was an end of what was known as the Black Activist Movement. The project that King was working on at the time of his death, the Poor People's March, ended as a tragic failure. The Black Panther movement was deprived of the member who many thought had the greatest potential for leadership. King was 39 and Hampton was 21. 2 new films, one a documentary and one a feature film, now depict the careers and demises of Hampton and King. But Judas and the Black Messiah by Shaka King and MLK FBI by Sam Pollard go further than that. They attempt to show the reasons beyond their deaths. In both films, with much justification, the finger of guilt points towards FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. No one knows why Hoover had a phobia towards any kind of strong leadership that will galvanize the grievances of Black Americans. But there is no doubt he did. It extended back for decades, even before he became FBI Director. As part of the General Intelligence Division, which surveilled radical groups, Hoover's first African-American target was the Black nationalist Marcus Garvey. One of the tactics he used, as he would later against King and Hampton, was infiltrating Garvey's organization with agents of Garvey's own race. Very interesting. Agent provocateurs, folks. Yeah, always think about that. It's been going on for a very long time. All right? It's been happening, socially engineered events. Just to give you an example. Very interesting here. At that time went on, Hoover's pathology on the subject did not subside. If anything, it increased. But it now commingled with other perceived menace, namely communism. For instance, according to Kenneth O'Reilly in his book, Racial Matters, in Hoover's eyes, the terrible Detroit race riot of 1943 was caused by communist agitation. Eventually, the director's obsession grew into fear of what he labeled the rise of a Black Messiah, a leader who would galvanize the race issue to the point that he could threaten the entire American political establishment. Paul Robeson was not in any way a Black Messiah, yet Hoover tapped Robeson's phone, opened his mail, got his concert engagements canceled, and attempted to find sexual blackmail on the singer/actor. All of these illicit and unethical activities were done under the veil of secrecy. Simultaneously, according to Hoover biographer Kurt Gentry, using FBI media assets to smear Hoover's targets. Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In the book J. Edgar Hoover, The Man and the Secrets, Gentry says the FBI director opened files on King in 1957. Shortly after the success of the Montgomery bus boycott, the Bureau's goal was to find an association with either communists or communist sympathizers. In Racial Matters, O'Reilly writes that Hoover's grand ambition was to tie King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, to Moscow, thereby discrediting King, the SCLC, and his allies. Pollard's documentary film, MLK FBI, focused on King's association with his friend and colleague, Stanley Levision. Levision was an attorney and businessman. He raised funds for the SCLC, offered legal advice, drafted speeches, and edited King's first book, Stride Toward Freedom. Levison was never really a communist, although he did support some of their causes, like sparing the lives of Julian and Ethel Rosenberg, who were controversially convicted of espionage for the Soviet Union and executed. But another supporter, Jack Odell, had been a member, even though he had left the party years earlier. Odell worked out of the SCLC, New York office. Because he was so influential with King, Hoover thought Levinson should be their main target. When Levinson suggested Odell become King's personal assistant to Atlanta, Hoover took this as proof of the Moscow plot. In 1962, Hoover decided to go full bore against King and the SCLC, using his stooges in the mainstream press. Odell was placed on suspension. In early 1963, Hoover truly feared the incoming march on Washington that August. He also resented the White House for getting behind the demonstration. The Kennedy brothers were doing much more than Eisenhower had done on civil rights. They were supporting the Brown versus Board of Education decision and working to strike down Jim Crow in the South. So Hoover devised another way to use these communist suspicions about Levinson and Odell. He would weaponize the reports to drive a wedge between King and the Kennedys. Hoover inundated both the White House and the Justice Department with a steady stream of paper insinuating King was under the influence of communists, and that both Odell and Levinson were active in CPUSA activities, according to Gentry's biography of Hoover. President Kennedy, in a walk with King in the Rose Garden, warned King about Hoover's surveillance and his tactics, and how it threatened both of them. King ultimately terminated Odell and said he would freeze out Levinson. Wiretapping King. After the success of the march on Washington, Hoover discovered that King still had ties to Levinson. Hoover now asked Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy to approve a wiretap on King. He saw his permission, even though, as authors such as Harris Wofford and Kurt Gentry have shown, Hoover had already been tapping King since the late 1950s. Hoover had authorized over 20 secret black bag jobs, breaking and enterings against the SCLC prior to 1963. He was now enlisting the Attorney General to give him the official cover. RFK approved a tap against Atlanta SCLC office for a period of 30 days, which he would review the result, and nothing and if nothing was there, discontinue it. This was on October 21st, 1963. We all know what happened a month later. As the film shows, with his friend Lyndon Johnson in the White House, Hoover campaigned against King moved into another gear, whereas JFK's Attorney General Bobby Kennedy has demanded that a negative dossier on King assembled by Hoover be withdrawn from government offices. How Hoover now attacked King in public, calling him a notorious liar. King tried to fight back, saying that Hoover and the FBI were lax in their investigation of crimes by white racists. At the signing of the President Kennedy Civil Rights Act in 1964, Johnson invited Hoover to sit near the front row during the ceremony. This is around the same time that the FBI sent the infamous sex tape of King in a hotel room to the SCLC Atlanta office. There was a threatening note enclosed saying King would soon be exposed as a philanderer. Therefore, if he knew what was best for him, he should kill himself. King briefly spoke out against Johnson's escalation in the Vietnam War in 1965. That he was scolded by other civil rights leaders since a split on Vietnam could endanger their standing with the White House. By 1967, King saw a photo essay in Ramparts magazine entitled "The Children of Vietnam." It depicts the indiscriminate bombing and napalming of civilians. King now began to attack the administration over the war. His famous speech at the Riverside Church in New York in 1967 now made him a target for not just Hoover and Johnson, but an editorial in the New York Times and one in the Washington Post. Hoover had enlisted 2 informants on King. One that was a photographer, Ernest Withers, The other, according to David Garrow in the FBI and Martin Luther King Jr., was employee office Jim Harrison. As King now began to expand his focus to Vietnam and poverty, Hoover began to ramp up COINTELPRO, which is counterintelligence program, operations against both civil rights groups and leftist press, and organizations like Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. These entailed the employment of not just spies, but agent provocateurs inside these organizations. And as King now began to arrange his Poor People's Campaign, the FBI discovered that King was present at the rape of a parishioner, and he looked on and laughed. As one of the commentators in the film notes, if this was just an audio tape, how could the agent know King was looking on? As the film depicts, after King's assassination, rioting, looting, and burning took place in over 100 American cities. To the film's credit, Andrew Young states that the accused killer, James Earl Ray, had nothing to do with the crime. But the film also says that Hoover did a crackerjack job investigating King's assassination. This leaves out two important points. Number one, in late March, the FBI prepared a memorandum saying that King has stayed at the Holiday Inn previously in Memphis. On King's return, the SCLC booked a room at the African-American-owned Lorraine Hotel. But before he arrived, someone, to this day, no one knows who it was, changed the location of the room. This made it possible for King to be shot from his balcony facing the street. Number two, another conclusion in MLK FBI is that the FBI is not a renegade organization, that it is really part of the establishment. Perhaps this is so, but not under Hoover. The case of Fred Hampton pretty much demonstrates it was a renegade organization against African Americans. The Black Panther Party began in 1966 in Oakland under Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. In its gun-toting militancy, it really owed more to Malcolm X than King. The Panthers carried guns in order to check instances of police brutality. They called it cop watching. In a direct response to this, the next year, Governor Ronald Reagan and the California legislature struck down the state's open carry law. In October of 1967, Newton was wounded and a police officer killed in a gun battle. I'll just stop it right there. For all you Reagan lovers out there, it's a fact. It is a known fact that they struck down state's open carry law. Think about that. Okay? Like I said, think about it before you jump on some bandwagon. You gotta criticize their faults as well. I'll continue. These kinds of incidents, the opposite of King's nonviolent approach, spurred recruitment of new members and the opening of new chapters nationwide, as did the famous picture of Newton sitting in a wicker chair with the rifle and the spear. As it peaked in 1970, there were 68 local chapters and thousands of members, but the Panthers also offered free breakfast programs and opening of health clinics and political education classes. All the above did not sit well with Hoover. In 1969, he labeled the Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. He called for an extensive COINTELPRO program to neutralize them. William Sullivan, the man directing these activities, said the Panthers were the black equivalent of the Klan. According to O'Reilly's book, Racial Matters, anyone in the Bureau who resisted that characterization and the program Sullivan arranged was given the ultimatum and a deadline. Charlie Bates of the San Francisco office initially resisted and Sullivan gave him 2 weeks to change his mind. He decided to go along for the sake of his career. The COINTELPRO began in San Francisco, Oakland area. Hoover's campaign against the Panthers was probably the most extensive, violent, and relentless counterintelligence program the FBI ever devised. It consisted of surveillance, infiltrations, agent provocateurs, police perjury, ersatz, threatening letters, and other techniques. In addition to that, the Bureau reached out to other law enforcement organizations in order to multiply the effect and to disguise the Bureau's own role in what would eventually become the destruction of the Panthers. There's probably no better example of this than the assassination of Fred Hampton. Hampton began his career as an effective community organizer for the NAACP. Attracted by a more radical approach of the Panthers, Hampton decided to join the Chicago branch. According to the Attorney General Ramsey Clark, Hoover was aware of Hampton before anyone else in the government was. Hampton was a dynamic speaker with a forceful yet malleable personality. He was an imaginative and an innovative organizer. One of his most notable achievements, depicted in the new film Judas and the Black Messiah, was his attempt to incorporate street gangs into the Panthers so they would not feud with each other. Reminds me of Cyrus from the Warriors, the character from the movie The Warriors. Very interesting. He also tried to make his coalition multiracial, including Hispanics, Native Americans, and the white working class. He named it the Rainbow Coalition. He was so effective that he became the Panthers state chairman, and at the time of his death, he was about to be appointed to the chief of staff for the national organization. If I'm correct with the white working class, they're called the Chicago Hillbillies, or the Chicago Hillbillies, I believe. Very similar to that. So very, very similar to that. Very similar. I think Chicago Hillbillies may be it. That may be it. So, and what's interesting about that, if you study the logo of the original origins of the logo with the Rainbow Coalition, had a black and white arms and hands shaking. And there's a Confederate Virginia battle flag right behind that. Yeah, I did a show on that too. You can look up in my archives many years ago, and I did that from the American Free Press. So please check that out. It's very cool. So you gotta look at all these angles here. The film depicts the police planning an informant in Hampton's office. William Lanier had raided bars impersonating an FBI officer. One of the unsuspecting clientele turned over their wallets and keys. He would steal a car, eventually caught the FBI, threatened to send him to prison for about 6 years. O'Neill decided to become a combination informant provocateur on Hampton for his Bureau Control agent, Roy Mitchell. O'Neill helped set up a raid at the Panthers' Chicago headquarters that resulted in 8 arrests. A later raid at Panthers headquarters, depicting the film, turned into a shootout. The occupants surrendered, the police went in and torched one floor of the building. During a November 13, 1969 gun battle on the south side of Chicago, 2 policemen and 1 Panther were killed. The police and FBI were so desperate to put Hampton away that they charged him for stealing $71 worth of ice cream bars. He was convicted for this and received 2 to 5 year sentence. His attorney had him temporarily released, even though Hampton had been ordered to back to prison. Mitchell asked O'Neill for a floor plan of Hampton's apartment that indicated where Hampton slept. At about 4:30 a.m. on December 4, 1969, 14 policemen detailed to the Cook County State Attorney's Office executed a raid for weapons. The police had 27 guns, 5 shotguns, and 1 machine gun. The lead cop was James Davis, an African-American who had a reputation for brutalizing black suspects. Hampton had been drugged by O'Neill with secobarbital. Secobarbital. Okay, a little tongue-tied there, but sorry, folks. He did not wake up during the Full-slide. Davis broke down the door and shot Panther Mark Clark through the heart. As Clark fell dead, he discharged his weapon onto the floor. That was the only shot fired by a Panther. The police fired over 90. 4 other occupants of the apartment were wounded. As noted above, the pattern of the fatal bullets into Hampton were at close range and into his forehead and temple. Cook County attorney in charge of the assault, Edward Hammerhand, had agreed to conceal the FBI's role in the illegal raid. The pretext was with the Panthers had illegal guns. It turned out the guns were all legally purchased and registered. It's registered, yeah. That's tyrannical rhetoric, folks, especially in the state of Illinois, because of the Illinois Constitution, you have the right to keep and bear arms without being infringed. So, Shaka King had directed the film in a workmanlike manner. He lays out story out clearly and does not draw attention to himself. The script by King and Will Burson is as accurate as one will find in historic film. About that. It uses the latest information garnered by attorneys Flint Taylor, Jeff Haas, and historian Aaron Leonard to implicate Hoover directly in the activities of Mitchell and O'Neill. Daniel Kaluuya plays Hampton. His portrayal is fine until you watch his film of the real Hampton. Imagine a young Samuel Jackson in the role. Both these films are worth seeing. It's rare to see Hollywood treat a series of subject seriously. America is still recovering from the reign of J. Edgar Hoover. The legendary lawman once said, "Justice is an incidental to law and order." The results of that motto are found in these films. So I might as well check out these movies of myself. So, and don't get me wrong, like I'm not crazy about the whole communist fist and so forth, but I always look at the stronger elements. When it comes to tyranny by government, this is how things react. It's called cause and effect. And J. Edgar Hoover was a Nazi sympathizer, okay, according to the stuff I read about him. I did a show on that too. It's like I got archives like way back, like 4 or 5 years ago. You should look it up, and it's very interesting. So this is why when people ask me about J. Edgar Hoover, I go, man, that guy's a effing sleazeball, okay, a Nazi sympathizer, a tyrannical hack. That's why you always got to beware of all these factions. It doesn't matter what side it is. And this is why when people ask me about protests, rallies, and movements, you always got to beware of the provocateurs, informants, and agent provocateurs. It's been going on for a very long time. And I see that a lot from both sides, whether it's the Tea Party or even Occupy. I've seen that too. I have a good friend of mine who was an activist for Occupy, and they were giving him crap too in Boston and Tampa as well. We had some political differences, but he's a man of principle, and I always love and respect him for that. It's just an example, folks. Always got to pay attention to the bigger picture. You see that too with these other synthetic movements out there. I don't have to say any names. I see it out there too. Higher guns. You got people protesting. You got people who want to start or criminals. And a good amount of them are higher guns. What J. Edgar Hoover's doing is happening now. It's nothing new at all. Actually, I have to check those 2 movies out myself. Observe responsibly, of course. How accurate is it? We got to make our own judgments. One thing we know, folks, the technocrats don't care about any of us, regardless of your political views or who you support. That's what comes down to it. But it's a good article. I always admire this. And I always encourage folks to always go to consortiumnews.com. It's very good stuff. So definitely check it out, man. And show some love. See those movies, because I got to do the same thing. And hopefully I do it. Now, the time comes, I'll just give you my intake. All right, that's it, my friends. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us on your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or something interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to Corum. Furthermore, I'll leave the footnote of this article on my speaker page. And if you want to contact me, you can hit me at LokiLuck03@protonmail.com. And if you want to donate, you can hit me at paypal.me or cash.app/LokiLuck3. If you want to send your donation to Consortium News, that would be great. They have a link for it on this page. And that's all. Once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. May your guardian spirits be with you.